Hello?
My dad's attacking my family.
Your dad is attacking your family?
No, my dad.
These were the chilling words of 12-year-old Daniel James Beaver as he begged for the police to save him from his two older brothers who were running rampant throughout his house, killing everybody inside. But less than a minute after the phone call began, Daniel could be heard screaming and begging for his life until the line went dead. Police arrived at the scene quickly and were greeted by a gruesome scene that had played out all across the house. Blood was found smattered around the porch, and a faint cry for help could be heard from inside. The plea came from 13-year-old Crystal Beaver, but everybody else in the house, except for 2-year-old Autumn, was dead.
One of these surviving bever children, a 13-year-old girl, saying her brothers were fascinated by mass killings for at least a year.
Police heard commotion near the back door of the property and discovered perpetrators, Robert and Michael Beaver, covered in blood and smiling as if they were proud of what they had done. Robert was laughing and told police that killing more than one person had turned him into a god. Unfortunately, Robert's interrogation tape was never released to the public, but 15-year-old Michael's was fully available and gives us some insight into what drove these boys to commit such a brutal crime.
I was hoping maybe you could kind of just go back at the beginning when all this started and kind of tell me what happened.
A couple months ago, we started talking about rampage and stuff like that.
Okay.
I didn't take it seriously at first, but then he started buying like body armor and stuff.
Where did he buy body armor from?
eBay and Amazon.
Robert's room was found filled with weapons and body armor, including machetes, hunting knives, and daggers. Apparently, they'd been collecting all of this for months. But when their sister Crystal told their mother about it, she simply passed it off as normal, saying that boys will be boys and there's nothing to worry about. She couldn't have been more wrong.
Where did he start buying guns from?
He bought them online. I think the website's like Bud's Gun Shop, and he bought 2 Glocks, 2 Glock 41, and a shotgun. I forget, it's like a Moss boot, I think. Then he bought 250 shotgun rounds on eBay. And then I think he bought close to 1,000 rounds for the Glocks.
Wow, okay.
Where was he supposed to pick those?
The ammunition was being shipped to the house.
Knives and machetes were one thing, but guns and over 1,000 rounds of ammunition are a completely different matter. So, once they'd ordered it to their house, they knew that their parents couldn't be home when it arrived. But what did they even need all of these weapons for? It doesn't take 1,000 bullets to kill 5 people. Well, it turns out that the brothers had a much bigger plan.
Tell me more about making plans and what you guys talked about.
Making plans, we all plotted every night.
Why did he want to do it?
Because he just, says he hates everyone. He thinks society is pointless. And also he wanted to, beat, amount of other famous people like Columbine and James Egan Holmes.
So did you guys have a goal? Did you have a number?
He just wanted, I think he wanted to kill 50. Okay.
The two boys stayed up late most nights talking and scheming, and once they realized they were both separately interested in murder, the die was cast. And from their perspective, there was no turning back. The boys had grown a bond throughout their lives due to their living conditions. Their parents, April and David Beaver, were somewhat abusive to their children. They were homeschooled and even told not to interact with children outside of their own family. This left them alone with their own thoughts a lot of the time, and their only perspective of the outside world was the one that they'd formed in their own minds. This is how they developed such a negative outlook on society and what drove them to form the next part of their plan.
You picked a date, you said.
Yeah, which was yesterday night. That was the date.
How did you pick the date?
They involved with the packages and stuff we have. Because, all the ammunition, he didn't want them to see that. So we wanted to kill everyone at the house first.
Okay.
And then wait for all the packages to show up over the weekend. And then we take the Yukon and we drive out of state with the guns.
So she fell down and started screaming.
Yeah, one of them kept stabbing her. I kind of freaked out because, And then my mom came in and she started yelling, called the police, get dad. And then he came over and started attacking her.
So he stabbed your mom with the same knife?
Yep, same knife.
And where did he stab her?
I think in the neck too.
Is she still alive?
Yeah, she was still screaming. And then that's about the time Dad came down. They got a little bit of a fight, but then eventually Robert got him down and
Did he cut his throat too?
Sitting on the phone with the police, I grabbed the phone, which is my phone, got my phone. And then I went into the kitchen and I smashed the underground.
Which was your phone?
Yeah, it was my phone.
Now you don't have a cell phone anymore.
The surviving children, Crystal and Autumn, were adopted by the same couple. But the fact remains that this once large yet reclusive family now exists solely as a foul legend on the conscience of every person that lives in the erstwhile peaceful town of Broken Arrow.